Is now former special assistant to President Biden and former director of message planning, Megan Hayes. Also with us, former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain, and the creator of The Circus, Mark McKinnon. It's great to have both of you here live in person on set. Megan, there is this recognition that Hillary Clinton in many ways paved the way for what we're seeing now with Kamala Harris. But are there lessons from Hillary Clinton that Kamala Harris, you think, is applying as you see it or should?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that when you are a woman, there are many challenges that you face, as you probably have recognized in the media industry as well. So she doesn't need to go out and state it. And she also, like Secretary Clinton ran in 2008, shattered more glass in the ceiling, put more cracks there than again in 2016. And I think that the vice president is learning from those mistakes. Again, also learning of how Secretary Clinton ran against Donald Trump and taking some of those mistakes and running her campaign very different and very disciplined right now. And I know it's been a short campaign, so it can be more disciplined. But I do think that the vice president is taking lessons from Secretary Clinton. I think it's only going to make shattering the glass that much more exciting. Yeah,
Politico notes that unlike Clinton, Harris, Mark, doesn't want to focus on gender as much as she wants to focus on her experience, her upbringing, her prosecutorial chops, right? And in interviews with 24 elected officials, consultants, Harris allies, nearly all of whom were women, I should say. This is what they said. They identified Harris's strategy as a bet that swing voters are prepared to vote for a woman for president, but care far more about her record and platform, not how her run will feature in history textbooks. They compare it more to a kind of Obama strategy. He didn't talk all the time about, I would be the first black president.
100%. I mean, I learned a lot more, and I think Kamala Harris did, from losing campaigns than winning campaigns. And she's going to stand on the shoulders of Hillary Clinton tonight and this week when she takes the nomination. And I think it's a very smart strategy not to make gender the center point. People get that. I mean, that's obvious. And so what they want to know is what your credentials are. And so, I think that this is a gold watch week for President Biden, but also for Hillary Clinton, too. She made this possible.
Absolutely. So what does she do? There are doubters out there, and they may not say it out loud, but talk to any woman who's in business, who has a job, who has a life, and they will talk to you about the slights that they hear. Donald Trump says them out loud. Her concern more is the voters who may hesitate. Is there an answer for that?
No, I don't think so. I think she goes out and runs the campaign she wants to run. I think that Donald Trump saying these things out loud actually help her and benefit her. People don't want to hear those things. It's discouraging to women. Women definitely don't want to hear it, and it turns people off. It's so negative. And I think she just continues to go out and draw the contrast between her and the former president and lay out her economic policies like she did last week. And I think, people will continue to gain enthusiasm for her and get to know her more.
Yeah, one of the things you write about, Mark, in Vanity Fair is the joy, right? And I think that there's been a hesitation for women to be too seen as joyful, that they're not serious enough, right? But there's something different about the way this feels. I don't know how long you've been in town or how many people you've been able to talk to, but how do you expect it to factor into what we see on the floor?
I think it's a huge factor, and I think it's been pent up since 2016. And I just think that there is a Peggy Noonan said it best. I think she said that it's not so much that Kamala Harris created a movement as the movement created her. There's just this pent-up desire for a woman, a diversity, to expand that Democratic tent. And Kamala Harris represents diversity. And she says vote for me because I'm qualified, not because I'm a woman. But she is a woman. And it would be a first. And I think America's more than ready to vote for a woman. The problem with Hillary not winning was not because she was a woman. There was a Hillary problem.
Yeah. One of the most popular people in America, poll after poll after poll, happens to be a black woman. Her name is Michelle Obama. She's going to be here tomorrow addressing the DNC. And of course, she has that famous phrase, when they go low, we go high, from the 2016 convention. It's a tone we're seeing Kamala Harris adopt. And let me just play a little clip of something she had to say.
This campaign is about a recognition that, frankly, over the last several years, there's been this kind of perversion that has taken place, I think, which is to suggest that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, when what we know is the real and true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what we see as strength.
That's an interesting choice of words, I think, because when I hear that, I think there's the human aspect of it, right? About beating people down versus building them up. There was also an economic message, a message about your future in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, her and President Biden have worked really hard the last 3.5 years to build out the middle class, to have policies that really impact the middle class. I know inflation is high, but they're making movements here and they're making changes. She laid out an economic policy last week, like I said, in North Carolina. But I do think, look, she's not going to take the low road. She's not going to attack him in the same way. She's not going to compare their looks. She's not going to say she's better looking. That's just weird and really just disgusting comments to be making. And she wants to win because she's qualified, and she wants people to vote for her because she's qualified, and no other reason.
So I've asked this question before. I've asked it this cycle, but I'll ask you again, Marcus. Everybody is going to do what you're supposed to do at a convention, which is to say positive things, to look forward to the future. Having said that, study after study after study showed that while people said they didn't like negative ads, that's what they responded to. So can they continue to feel the joy, to spread the joy? How do you balance that with the reality of what some people are feeling?
Yes, but what they really want is a forward-leaning message, which is what Kamala Harris does. I mean, Donald Trump was one of the only candidates in history I can remember that wanted to go backwards. And he picked that lock in history at a time where people were afraid of the future. I think they're ready for the future again. I think they're ready for a joyful, optimistic, uplifting message. I mean, it was a Reagan message, that was a Bush message, that was a Clinton message. That message works over time, and I think she's got a whole new level of joy and optimism that people are just bursting forward, and I think that's what's really elevating this campaign.
City on a hill, I believe in a place called hope. We could go
100%.
on. It's great to see you guys. Mark and Megyn, stay right here.